Get on up.
Everybody right there.
Get into it.
Everybody right there.
Get involved.
Everybody just come on up. Come on up. Come on, come on. Come on with your come on.
Welcome to The Public Good. This is Sam Magavern from the Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites 270 community organizations working to build a better Buffalo. Delighted to be joining you from now on every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Today we're joined by Flo Trippi, the Western New York Regional President of CSEA, and Richard Lipsitz, who's the President of the Western New York Area Labor Federation. We're going to be talking about the proposed Constitutional Convention here in New York State. Don't forget to follow PPG on Facebook and Twitter, and of course you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. The Public Good is sponsored in part by Univera Healthcare, real people who really care. Video of this show is on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ppgbuffalo, and you can find videos from previous week's shows on our YouTube page. Before we get started, I want to let you know about the Community Talk with Mark Lamont Hill, hosted by Open Buffalo. That is happening this Thursday, October 26th, 6 p.m. at Bennett High School. Dr. Hill is the author of Nobody, Casualties of America's War on the Vulnerable, From Ferguson to Flint and Beyond. He will be headlining Open Buffalo's annual Justice and Opportunity Series. There will also be there 3 high school students from Buffalo who are winning awards from Open Buffalo and financial commitments to help them do innovative projects here in Buffalo over the next year. It'll be an inspiring evening, a great night. It's Mark Lamont Hill at Bennett High School this Thursday, 6 p.m., presented by Open Buffalo. Hope you can be there for that. Also just want to give a shout out to the Area Labor Federation and Richard Lipsitz for commissioning PPG the last 2 years to do our Working Toward Equality reports. The most recent one, Working Toward Equality Updated, Race, Public Transit, and Employment in Buffalo region, is available on our website. Be sure you take a look at that. And thank you so much, Richard, for your leadership in enabling that work. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, but we're here today to talk about the proposed Constitutional Convention and find out why organized labor is strongly against it. And we're going to dive into some of the issues that presents, and it's a good opportunity to learn about some of the important worker protections that we have in New York State and why they might be at risk. So we'll start with just, maybe a brief statement from each of you about overall, what is the proposed Constitutional Convention and why are you against it?
Well, I'll start.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm with CSEA, Civil Service Employees Association, and the Western Region President, which is a 14-county area in Western New York. Our union, our CSEA, is against this totally. In the first place, the New York State Constitution has been a protectorate of many rights for union members, and especially for the public sector. We have our bargaining rights through the New York State Constitution protected through that, and we also have our pensions protected. Now, pensions probably are not very much of an interest to most people, but they are to the public sector because of the fact that traditionally, public sector workers have taken much less wages due to issues, obviously, of funding and so on within government. Because of that, many years ago, in the 60s, I believe it was created this New York State pension system so that anyone who is part of the public sector, whether you be the regular public sector, whether you be a firefighter, whether you be a police or teacher, each of us has a different section to the public pension system. The public pension system, is protected by the New York State Constitution. The mentality this day and age is not a very good one when it comes to protecting what public sector workers have.
Yeah.
And because of that, it is an extremely vulnerable issue right now for the Constitutional Convention.
Right.
We are very much against it. We have other reasons to do that too, meaning the cost is prohibitive and will be prohibitive for New York State citizens. And there are other parts of the New York State Constitution that should not be open. And there's ways to change it without going through this costly effort.
Yeah. Flo, tell us a little bit about CSEA and your members. What kind of workers do you represent, and what kind of work are they doing for the public?
CSEA represents public workers, although we have now private sector workers also. What we do is represent people who work for the state and all the state agencies. We represent cities, counties, towns, villages, many school districts, in fact, a lot of them in this area. And we represent also the retirees who have left CSEA. And then we have a small group now that's private sector. When jurisdictions have gone out and contracted their work, we follow those employees and make sure they remain members of a union, remain with the power that they need to have. And we've done that with many, so now we are in the process of, as I said, rebuilding probably more through the public sector, through the private than through the public sector.
And am I right in thinking that a lot of the workers you represent in public employment have pretty low wages on the scale, and so the pensions are of particular importance to people whose income has not been very strong?
Exactly, and by the way, the average pension of a CSEA worker is $17,000 a year. So it's not like this is going to fund their entire retirement. It's just so that they can live in a little bit more dignity when they do retire.
And Flo, there's been a movement nationwide to try and privatize pensions, essentially to turn them into 401k plans and have private money managers and other people in the finance industry managing them instead of state pension funds. Does that play into this? Are there people kind of eager for changes to the pension system so that they can be making more money off of it?
Exactly. Right now, our pension system is funded strictly through the state and through investments made by the controller of New York State, which is Tom Ginopoli. Tom Ginopoli has done a tremendous job since he took over regarding keeping this pension and growing it. He has done significant issues. For example, he uses the money to invest in New York State businesses.
Right.
When you do that, you're also helping your state along. And so I think Tom's done a great job at this. But yes, the one thing that has happened is many of the legislators, by the way, the governor tried it a few years ago with the Tier 6 of the retirement system, to go to a what we call a contributory plan, which is the 401k issue. Yes, do you think Wall Street loves it, because every time we have to make a change in that, we have to pay a fee. And believe me when I tell you, there's a lot of people chomping at the bit to try and get into that pension system.
Yeah. Richard, I want to ask you about fears about bargaining rights being undermined by a constitutional convention. But first, maybe tell us a little bit about the Area Labor Federation and what you do.
Right, it's the umbrella group for all the unions in Western New York, all the AFL-CIO and change-to-win unions in Western New York, from Jamestown all the way over to Batavia, including the cities of Olean, Dunkirk, Jamestown, Buffalo, Niagara Falls. So it's a very large labor federation, 135 affiliated organizations, and about 140,000 workers in those organizations.
And we mentioned earlier that you were the ones who had the idea for and commissioned our Working Toward Equality report with a lot of different faith groups and civil rights groups here. You obviously take kind of a broad view of the mission of organized labor here in Western New York. I wonder if you just kind of talk a little bit about how you see it as part of the community and part of issues like civil rights.
Yeah, sure. Our core mission is defending the living standards and working conditions of our members. But in order to do that, you cannot detach yourself from the general motion in society. So we're in favor of progressive movements, progressive legislation, progressive politicians and leaders who put at the center of their thinking the living standards and working conditions of ordinary people. And since that's the case, we've made alliances with lots of organizations around here. We're not alone in this. The labor movement is moving in this direction all over the country. But I think Flo, who's vice president of the Labor Federation, I think we take pride in being at the forefront of this. I think it's an important direction for our work. Our Labor Federation on this question of the Constitutional Convention is 100% against. Nobody has come out in favor of it. And that's not because we're intimidating people. It's because there are very good guarantees, not very good, there are guarantees in that Constitution that rival in any state of the United States, and including in the believe it or not, in the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution, The right to organize and the right to bargain collectively is enshrined in the Constitution. We're not interested in seeing that played around with in any fashion.
Yeah, and let's talk about what's going on in some other states around the union that would give you cause for concern about that.
Well, if you don't, when something like the guarantee to collective bargaining and the right to organize is in the Constitution, it's much more difficult for legislation to come up in state houses, either if they have bicameral or they have a single unitary legislative body, that could erode that. So things like right to work, which is now in 28 states of the union, and where 22 states, including New York, still have the right to have a union shop. We're concerned that the opening of the Constitution through a convention could erode that guarantee.
Yeah, let's talk about right to work. That's one of the most misleading labels of all time.
Yeah. It was actually genius.
It
was actually genius.
The right to work for less.
That's what we say.
Yeah. So
it means you get to be part of a bargaining unit without being participating in the burden, i.e. the financial support for that organization. So it means that if you want to be in, you can be in. If you don't want to, you don't have to. You don't have to pay dues. You don't have to pay any kind of fee. And when that's the option for people, it opens the door to undercutting the ability of the organization to bargain collectively, to organize new workers, to grieve and arbitrate questions. It undermines the entire fabric of our labor relations system. Labor relations in the United States since 1935 have been based on collective bargaining. This makes it not unique in the world, but one of the very few countries in the world where that is part of the law of the land. Collective bargaining means literally collective. It means everybody as one. We're in favor of that. We think it's better for workers. We think it's better for people to join together in a concerted action to protect their living standards and working conditions. Without that, it's a race to the bottom. And we've seen a consistent attempt ever since, especially Ronald Reagan, to push us towards this bottom. And it's actually had quite an effect over the years. So we're not in favor of anything that would undermine that at all. And right to work undermines it completely. The 28 states that don't have union security any longer have seen falling living standards, falling working conditions for workers, both in the unions and outside. There are still unions in those states, but they're weaker than they were before.
Yeah, let's talk about Wisconsin being a prime example.
It isn't.
What happened in Wisconsin?
I'm going to actually let Flo take that one.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you what has, even after all of the protests and so on, that they did go right to work. However, since that happened, which is about 5 years ago now, the workers have lost 17% of their salary levels. 17% have gone down. Not only that, you cannot bargain anymore for your health benefits. That cannot be on the table. So you have these agencies or these jurisdictions, school districts, that are short $1,000. Guess what they do? They take it out of the health benefits that these people have currently enjoyed. And by the way, I can speak specifically to that. I have a nephew who's a teacher in Howell, Michigan, which is now a right-to-work state. Michigan is a right-to-work state. In the last 4 years, and he has 2 small children, by the way, in the last 4 years, his health benefits have changed 4 times for the worse. Because every time the Howell School District decides that they're in a budget deficit, they take it out of the hides of the employees.
Yeah. Now, what about some of our listeners who might not belong to a union and they're thinking, well, so this doesn't affect me. Why do I care whether there's bargaining rights?
I was just going to say,
explain that a
Yeah.
little.
Well, this has to do with this question of race to the bottom versus a strong working class that demands and obtains wages and benefits that provide for a reasonable standard of living. If you have less organized labor, the employer has full rights to do whatever they want. There really is no, if you stop and think about it, there really is no minimum wage in this country. If you stop and think about it, there's no guaranteed right to health care. What we had was an attempt to reform the health insurance markets through the Affordable Care Act, which I think was working in an uneven way, but basically in the right direction, and now is being undercut by the President of the United States himself. There is no guarantee to health care. There's no guarantee to a pension. There's only guarantee to Social Security, which is not a pension program. It's an income replacement program, which we will fight to the end to keep. But it's not the same as having a pension, health care, wages guaranteed. There's no guarantee of seniority. There's no guarantee. There's nothing in law that guarantees any of this stuff.
Right.
And in fact, the things that are guaranteed in law, like health and safety on the workplace, in the workplace, the President of the United States is also trying to undermine through quote deregulation of the deep state. So we have multiple issues that without the labor unions and the labor movement would be to the whims of the employers.
Yeah.
Period. The end. And to whoever the employers have as their spokespeople, whether they're politicians or they're people like the Koch brothers and the Mercers who are out to frankly undercut the living standard and working conditions of ordinary people, to take out from them and give to themselves. It's the most obscene thing we've seen. The most obscene situation since the 1930s.
And
And that's what we're
Can I
facing.
just
go
add
ahead,
to
Bob,
that?
please.
Even though you're not a union member, you're benefiting from what unions have done, because what we've done is we've set a standard of
Right.
living. The middle class, that was created by the unions. Now, if you have this standard of living, it stands to reason. I mean, look at the Fight for 15, which we were doing. Those are non-union people,
Right.
but we're working with them to try and get them a minimum wage so that they can live and support their families with some kind of dignity. So even though we may not be a member of a labor union, you're still benefiting from what we've done
Right.
as union people.
Reminds me of one of my favorite bumper stickers, the weekend, brought to you by the labor movement.
Exactly.
So
40-hour week
Just
brought
to
to you by
echo-
the labor union.
just to echo what you've both been saying, there's lots of research that shows that in an individual labor market, non-union members benefit from a strong union presence in terms of their wages and benefits. So
Well, New
just
York
as
State's
you're
the best
saying,
example.
It raises that floor for everybody, not just for people
New
who
York
belong
State
to
is if it's not the best, it's certainly in the top 5 states that proves that point.
Yeah,
Because we have a very high level of unionization still in New York, and
Yeah.
California, Oregon, Washington,
Right.
Maryland, a bunch of states. It's not like we're gone by
Yeah.
any means. We have some real power yet, but we are intent on keeping what we have and defending it against an onslaught of attacks from numerous directions. And we do see this constitutional convention from that light. We're not against amending the New York State Constitution. But there's a method for it that doesn't open up the entire Constitution. And that is, and it's going to be on the ballot. I think we said it already, but if we haven't, there are going to be a couple of them on the ballot this 2 weeks from now.
Right.
And one of them takes pensions away from those who've been convicted of a felony. That's a constitutional amendment.
right.
So it proves the point. You don't have to have a constitutional convention in order to make changes to the Constitution. But you have to work hard to get something on the ballot. You have to lobby. You have to write it up. It has to be passed twice, I think.
Twice through the
And
legislature.
then it has to be
and
voted
then
by
it has to be voted by the
member,
electorate.
by the,
And
sorry, the
casino
population.
gambling is a good example
That's
of
right.
that. In 2013, we changed the Constitution to allow casino gambling in New York State.
But we don't want to open this Constitution to the win. First, we haven't even gotten into how people get elected to the Constitutional Convention,
Right.
what the makeup of the last Constitutional Convention was,
Cost.
how lopsided it was against people like Flo and me, who have almost no chance of being elected delegates, or ordinary people from the community,
Exactly.
and how much it's aimed towards career politicians, people from the judiciary, private business people,
People with money.
people with money.
We had talked about the importance of wage floors, and that's one of the other issues that I know you're concerned about with the Constitutional Convention is prevailing wage. So can you just start by maybe explaining what prevailing wage means for those who aren't familiar with
it's
it?
that rate that a contractor has to pay for a government contract in the area of labor costs. So they take the 3 highest from various, you're in the Labor Department, right? From three sections of the state.
Right.
And then they come up with a number. So, for example, if you bid on a government project to pour concrete in a government building, whoever is going to bid on it, whether they're union or non-union, has to pay a certain level of wage and benefits.
Right.
And without that, it can be as low as somebody could get away with.
So I guess the short way I'd describe it is that it ensures that when we spend public money on getting a job done, that money goes toward quality jobs, not poverty level jobs.
Exactly.
That it
Yeah.
establishes a standard that's going to be a quality job. That's
Yeah.
going to be something you can sustain a family on.
Yeah.
You're not going to get rich on it, but you're going to be able to sustain a family on it.
And also the quality goes the other way. the quality of the work is much better
Right.
because of the fact that you do have really good workers and good union workers doing that job.
And there's some good research from our friends at Fiscal Policy Institute and other places that proves your point, Flo, that shows that you get better quality work when there are prevailing wage laws than when you don't. So Richard or Flo, what's the concern with prevailing wage? How is that protected
it's in the
by
Constitution.
the Constitution?
It's right there.
It's there,
Yeah. And the concern, of course, is that you open. This has been, if you read the Buffalo News editorials over the decades, you read editorials in other papers around the state. This is a consistent theme of theirs: is that this is costing New York too much money.
Right.
So, what they do is it's very clever reasoning. They say that since it's all paid for by taxpayer money, that it means that more money goes into the pockets of, quote, the unions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reality is that that's taxpayer money being put to good use to provide for, as Flo just said, quality, on-time production of whatever it is. And it doesn't just have to be a construction site. It could be any kind of government contract that gives people a good wage and provides for reasonable benefits. Now, is it true that most of those jobs, and especially in the building trades, end up going to union contractors? Absolutely, because they are the ones who do the best in this field. But then we get better projects that last longer, that are very rarely over cost, and that provide for good wages and benefits, not just for their people, but the spillover to everybody else. So we're not interested in seeing that go away. And again, it'd be very difficult to do that just through legislation. But you open the Constitution through a convention, anything's possible. And
again, it's big business.
And
contractors want this because they can pay them what they want.
Right.
But again, it suffers in the quality of the work that's going to be provided.
Right, and we've certainly seen that here in Western New York, where jobs where prevailing wage is not required, that you see contractors coming in, sometimes with workers from out of state,
that's the other thing.
Poorly trained, not good.
It's amazing.
Job safety.
It's amazing to me how the Buffalo News and some of these others complain about that, but don't complain about the exorbitant profits that are taken from the same project if it's done non-union.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Somehow that's okay, but having the money flow down to the working people is a disaster for taxpayers. But it's okay to have it flow up. That's okay to taxpayers. So we're not interested in seeing that changed for the worse. Period. The end. And so we have to figure out ways to make sure that we defend it. It's unfortunate that we're in a situation where we have to defend what we have, but that's the way it works, and especially in the era of Donald Trump.
Right.
It's what we're faced with. The Koch brothers are interested in a constitutional convention in New York State. So are the Mercers, who are actually emerging as even more repellent backers of the president because they're Steve Bannon's people. So we're interested in making sure these people don't have their say on how our Constitution will work going forward.
Yeah.
There you go.
For folks who might not be familiar, do you want to explain who the Koch brothers are, or who the Mercers are?
Yeah, the Koch brothers are major financiers in the. I think it's in the. What industry are they actually in?
Oil
There's
refineries.
many.
Oil. That's right.
Biggest.
They're oil and gas. Yeah, and they've emerged on the national scene in the last 10, 12 years as prime supporters of those who frankly oppose everything the labor unions support.
Right.
And, with CSEA, I can speak specifically to my union, CSEA. The services we provide in this state to the school districts, these are people that really work for almost nothing, but give a service. They love the kids they work with, or they love their patients in a developmental thing. We have a major issue going on now with the Western New York Children's Psych Center, where they're trying to move children who have a facility that's absolutely wonderful for them and are getting great care to a different facility where they're going to be mixed in with an adult population. So these are the kinds of things that we do. We provide all kinds of services to the people of New York State, and we're saying we're not asking for any more in salaries or whatever. We've given at the table like everybody else has, but for God's sakes, don't take away the one thing that give these people some dignity when they retire.
That secure
And
retirement.
That's secure retirement. Right.
Yeah, I just want to go back to some of the broader points we were making earlier about the importance of organized labor, even if you're not a union member. And we talked about how it raises wages throughout the economy. But I also just want to mention two other facts about organized labor and its importance. One is that organized labor traditionally has been the driving force behind things like raising the minimum wage and other progressive legislation that helps all workers. And if you chart sort of the strength of the minimum wage over the years, it corresponds exactly with the strength of organized labor at that time. So there's that incredibly potent political force. And then I also just want to highlight the importance of organized labor for workers of color. And one of the things we reported on in our Working Toward Equality report was that the union premium, in other words, the benefit from belonging to a labor union, is higher for people of color than for whites, partly because people of color tend to be in the lower paid jobs due to the history of racism in this country. But it means that organized labor is all the more important for addressing those racial disparities in earnings and income in our society. So just wanted to call out those things.
It's a great equalizer, folks.
Yeah.
Remember that, because when you join a union, your salary is the same whether you're a female, male, white, black, green, blue, whatever color you are, doesn't matter. You're going into a system where you're going to make a significant wage that is, or the wage that is appropriate for everybody.
Yeah. Well, we are running toward the end of our program. I want to invite you to kind of sum up your key points in terms of why you're urging people for the no vote.
Wait, let me just say that our united stand is not to open the New York State Constitution at this time, on this 20th anniversary, when it is up for a vote, in order to protect the very important rights that we have as working people. And this is a united stand of everybody in our movement, and it spreads beyond members of our organization.
The last Constitutional Convention was held in 1967. The Constitution has been changed almost 200 times since then. So why have we, as New York State citizens, going to pay $300,000 to $400,000 million, for a constitutional convention when we can do that in a regular legislative session?
All right. Well, I want to thank Richard Lipsitz, president of the Western New York Area Labor Federation, and Flo Trippi, the president of the Western Region of CSEA, for being on the program today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next week on The Public Good, we'll be speaking with Andrew Markham. He's from the Center for Self-Advocacy. Tune into The Public Good every Tuesday at 7 p.m. here on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 AM. Thank you.
Everybody over there,
Get on up.
everybody right there,
Get into it.